What is NERF Hyper? Well, this is my completely sourceless speculation. Coop's gonna lose it. I think it's little balls. Hello and welcome again to another episode of NERF News, your number one source for NERF news on the net. I'm your host, Drac, and today we're talking about NERF Hyper. You guys remember NERF Hyper, right? You remember when I talked about it? In March of 2020, 11 months ago. So I'm not gonna say that we were right, but if I were gonna say it, I would say it like this. I was right, do. So let's get the obvious out of the way. NERF Hyper is little balls. It's little rival balls. Now, it's not made of the same foam as rival balls because, as we've discussed in the past, they would not be able to get nearly the performance metrics, which even with Hasbro's traditional lying about their performance metrics, could not possibly be 110 FPS if these are in fact roughly 50 cal rival rounds. Now, 50 cal rival rounds are no joke. Hopefully there's some cross compatibility, and I'm guessing that they're 50 cal rival rounds. I still don't have my hands on any. I expect that we will very, very soon, despite the fact that the Verge article that a lot of this information or official information comes from is not saying when they're going to release. As a fun little aside, why would Hasbro launch something to mass media that they don't have a formal launch date? Probably because they're tired of goofballs like us guessing before they're ready. And so that's effectively what NERF Hyper is. If we break it down and take all of the metrics out of this article, there are going to be 3 blasters in the initial line. There's going to be a spring-powered pistol, a spring-powered pump-action rifle that's kind of like a shotgun, but not a shotgun. And then there's going to be a motorized Percy's-esque full-size blaster that's going to be the flagship du jour. They come in at 3 different price points. They're clearly going to be a premium product in terms of their overall pricing, and they're doing something new. But are they? And so I guess before we even talk about the blasters themselves individually and the merits of each and how they fit into this line, I just want to say that, like, we spent an entire year just grilling Hasbro for making garbage, overpriced products with lower quality guts that were impossible to open and service. They violated right to repair. They did a lot of stuff that was seriously, seriously disingenuous to the hobbyist community. And then the only promises that we had that things were going to get better were through licensed deals with Roblox and Fortnite of all places. So it is really, really nice to see Hasbro leaning into the guns, doing something that they know works well commercially and that the hobbyists really like, which of course is Rival, and then kill it. Now, some of you heard, and they're killing it, and you thought, like, in a good way, right? Like when you make a 102 on that pop quiz that you didn't even know was coming, on a book that you didn't even read. Middle school. No, I mean kill it as in they have killed a rival with this. There's no reason to use slower, softer, floatier ammo if these do half of the things that they promise. This is more capacity per space. This is largely more compatible with other blaster types. If the rival rounds that are going to be coming out, or I guess we should call them the Hyper rounds, are going to be dense, compact foam ammunition capable of initial muzzle velocities of 110 FPS, which is what the article says, then these are going to kill Rival. There's no reason that you would want to use Rival over these if they perform better out of the box and they have higher onboard ammo capacities. Plus, the reloads look slick. They're really leaning into the paintball avenue, which is something that I was doing with Rival a long, long time ago. I was wearing pod belts full of Rival pods, and I would use that for events like Gen B and events like End War, where I would just brrr the whole thing to get quick reloads. And if you remember, I did an entire video on planned obsolescence in Rival. They went as far as they could with it. Rival just isn't getting any better. The Percy's is the best Rival blaster imaginable. It came in at a fair price, and it had a sleek design. It was an SMG, high rate of fire, just top. The Percy's is the best Rival blaster I think that's been made, followed by the Hades, which is an awesome spring-powered blaster. So they're leaning hardcore into hoppers. Even the spring blasters are all going to be using hoppers this time, which is very Dart Zone-esque in a way, but also makes a ton of sense given the direction that they're going with these. So just to give you guys an idea of where my headspace is at as a professional in this industry and possibly one of the biggest NERF fanatics on planet Earth, inside there are 2 wolves. There's Wolf 1 that doesn't want to reward Hasbro for doing something cool after a year of just like absolutely robbing their loyalists blind. And then there's Wolf 2 that's like, yo, this is a pretty cool thing. It's pretty neat. So we're going to talk about the pros and cons macro level, and then we're going to talk about the blasters individually. So the pros are that this is a better ammo type than Rival, and therefore should be embraced as something that's really cool for CQB, for indoor arenas. Like, this is going to be neat. The rounds are a little less expensive than some of the more expensive rounds. They're less expensive than Ultra Darts. They're less expensive even than Rival when it was introduced, but we'll talk more about price later. And you can fit a lot of them on. That means more play, less reloading, pods to brrr as soon as you want, like really, really, really cool stuff. These are an interesting CQB blaster, particularly if you play indoors or in an arena or a sense like that where your ammo recovery is going to be good. Also, it's just nice to see Hasbro doing something new, and I'm thrilled to see them doing something that's like 90s styled radical with the Hyper logo. It looks good, it's clean. I think the design language is consistent throughout, and I actually really like the way the blasters look, and if they do what they say they will, I think that they're going to be pretty cool. In particular, because the rising tide raises all boats, I'm thrilled that they're doing this just as NERF. This is the NERF line doing NERF blasters in a NERF style well. It seemed like for a while they were only willing to take risks with branded properties and they just weren't developing. They were very stagnant. Things like Elite 2.0 were a huge step backwards, and then things like Ultra were like a slap in the face to retailers and enthusiasts alike. So this is good. This is a good thing for NERF, and again, for the hobby to be cool, for the sport to grow, for everything to do what it does right now. NERF has to be cool. It's the umbrella that we live under. Whether we want to or not, like, it's good to see Hasbro doing good things, or at least creative things, or trying new things at the very least. I'm thrilled. Now let's talk about that other wolf. These things are going to be awful for outdoor play. In addition to having all the issues that Rival has with wind and being pulled by it, not being as accurate as traditional darts, they also are small balls that will roll all over the place, get lost in grass, etc. and so forth. You thought your Rival recovery was bad? You thought your half-length dart recovery was bad. These things, you're never going to see them again. I hope that they're biodegradable, and if they're not, I think that's a huge missed opportunity for the brand. They don't mention anything about reusability or sustainability in this article, which tells me that they would take that as a selling point. So I think that these are legitimately just going to be foam balls, dense foam balls with a little bit more weight so that they can get this power out of their initial velocity. How far are they going to go? I have no idea how drag is going to affect these things because I don't know what the sectional density of them is yet. But I'm skeptical. I also think that I'm going to lose a lot of them. I will lose a lot of these. I feel like on an average SE&C war where we play in grass around Pine Straw, and in particular near a street where things can roll away, I think that if I brought out 1,000 of these rounds, I would be lucky to bring 500 of them home with me.
I'm losing my balls over here!
Another huge negative is that we've reset the planned obsolescence. There are some things in this initial line that are really cool. The Mach 100 has all the hallmarks of a Perseus, although they took away one of the absolute coolest features of the Perseus, which was the built-in rechargeable battery, and they're replacing it with D batteries. That means that even though this bad boy comes in at $70, you should expect to be paying $80, $84 by the time you have it powered up and ready to go. Consumer tastes go back and forth as to whether or not rechargeable batteries are a positive or a negative, but I think that as enthusiasts, we can agree that rechargeable batteries are chef's kiss.
Yeah, boy.
And spending money on alkalines is just garbage. I mean, what is this? The 60s? Like, let's do better. There's better batteries out there. These are also not cheap, with 50 rounds costing you $12, 100 rounds costing you $20, and 200 rounds being $30. At minimum, these are going to be 15 cents a round, and that's a lot of money for darts in a world where we're used to paying a nickel for really, really good darts over in Dart Zone land, or even less if we're buying from aftermarket manufacturers. Now, the good news is that I don't know how you DRM a ball, and hopefully, if it can be done, Hasbro will do it, but I'm going to immediately start looking into trying to produce some sort of in-house alternative to these expensive ammo types and maybe even make them better for things like modified flywheels and extra power and what have you. Other than that, the blasters themselves are pretty expensive. We're talking $70 for a flagship, which is pretty okay. But the big sin is that the Hyper Rush, the pistol, with a 40 round onboard hopper, admittedly, that's a lot of onboard capacity for a single shot, but it's still a single shot spring pistol, and that one's gonna set you back $30? Are you serious? $30 for your entry level single shot pistol? Crazy. In a world where you can get rival pistols that do a lot for $10, this has got to be extra special awesome. So time will tell. Can't wait to get my hands on them, and we'll see. But those are just some of my concerns. I feel like before we launch into the speculative hype machine, it's important to stay grounded and realize that, like, there are pros and cons to new anything. And in this case, like, one of the biggest cons is going to be that if you've already bought into the rival ecosystem, you're done. These are useless to you. There's no way that they'll be cross-compatible. If you bought paintball gear to do rival, you can still use that for the Hyper, but you're gonna have to buy into a whole new thing or risk being kind of just outpowered by overall capacity and slightly higher initial FPS. if these are better than Rival in the ways that we expect them to be, there's no reason to be using Rival anymore, which is kind of a sad end to a wonderful legacy where, you know, Nerf got competitive for a little while, and I thought that was pretty cool. Also, there's a whole choke tube argument, but we won't get into that. Let's talk about the blasters. Starting with the Rush for $30, you get exactly what you expect, a single shot pistol with a hopper on top. It doesn't look particularly complicated in any way, shape, or form. You can see that muzzle there has some rifling in it. That's kind of interesting. And you can also see that the trigger well looks a little cramped, but it's got a handguard. Time will tell. All of these blasters I expect will be larger than we think they are in our minds. As soon as we see those little balls, we think that the blasters are going to be smaller. It's important to have some perspective, and some of these other images where people are using the blasters kind of helps lend to that perspective. In the case of the Rush, the entire hopper assembly is pretty clearly going to be the slide. It's going to have to slide all the way back. Very little chance of it being auto-retracting, which means you're going to have to push it back forward. The Maverick days, we didn't know how good we had it until it was gone. And that's it. I don't see a safety mechanism on this blaster, and then the other primary concern that I have is that I don't see screw ports on this blaster. If this thing's been solvent welded shut, I'm gonna be furious. If it's something that we can take apart and tinker with, I think that it's really, really cool. Goes one way or the other, right guys? Overall design language, like I said, is consistent. It looks good. It looks like it's pretty radical. Definitely straight out of the 90s, and it's painted on at least one side, so that's a step in the right direction. $10 more brings you up to the $40 price point and lets you play with the Surge. The Surge is a pump action Springer, a time-tested primary class blaster requiring no batteries. This guy is a pretty standard built-in pump grip. Trigger, no muss, no fuss, no problems. You can see in the middle of the Hyper logo there, and I like that it's not quite broken up. You can see that there's going to be some sort of funky jam door. I don't know how prevalent a jam door that size is going to be. Again, I think that the jam door will be larger because I think that the blaster is larger than our brains make us think it is. But no muss, no fuss. Hoppers in the back. Quick, easy to load through a hopper aperture. I don't know if it's going to pop up or how exactly that's going to work, but it looks like it's a hinged aperture on the back, allowing you to fill relatively quickly. And again, we did aftermarket stuff with the Percy's. Out of Darts had an amazing version of a hopper extension that lets you really get the most out of those guys. But this is a pretty sleek looking blaster. I like the teeth cutouts. I can kind of see a hop up tab in the barrel. Other than that, same design language, same cramped trigger well, but pump action Springer, always a good place to be. I think this one has the potential to be sweet. It also probably, if the electronic stuff doesn't like deliver the hits, this will be my go-to pick. I think that this is the Alpha Trooper entry level of the line, and I'm excited to get my hands on it. Here we have a picture of a girl in some sort of weird Taekwondo outfit wielding this thing, giving you somewhat of an idea of scale, but it tells us two things. One, Hasbro clearly believes that we're going to use these awful rail attachments on the grips, the handguards, to store extra pods, which just tells me that nobody at Hasbro has ever played paintball once in their life. And despite the fact that they think that this is a good idea to go in that direction, they don't realize that these things are going to fall off the instant you hit the snake. Like that's bad play, just poor implementation. I would much rather see some way of holding these pods than what they're doing right here. However, it also gives us our first look at the eye protection for this. Now, just because of how toy safety standards work, they really should be including eye protection, and I do want to applaud them for doing so. However, just like the other face masks, it's like they're picking the lowest common denominator for face masks over at all the toy companies. I'll roast Dart Zone for this. I'll roast Zuru for this. Like pretty much anybody who sells anything other than like half mask goggles, which are cost effective and look decent. These things just look hideous. They look like you're trying to like go to Metro Nui, but you didn't want to like pay the admission fee, so you bootlegged your way onto the boat. Just not great. So bad eye protection aside, I think that this gives you a sense of scale of the blaster. And while she should be two-handing it, no muss, no fuss, no problems, it does tell you that some of these refill kits, in addition to being in pods, the pods are valuable. They're going to come with clippy attachment things that you should throw immediately in the bin. That said, let's move on to the flagship. So here's the Mach 100, and it gives you kind of an idea of how this one's going to pop up to reload here, but also it gives you a sense of scale of the blaster. This seems to be an adult holding the blaster in this one picture, and then if we cut to the super clean version, I can tell you that I wish, it looks like at some point in their prototyping they had a rechargeable battery for the foregrip there. If that's where the batteries go, and this guy has taken D batteries, it's going to be super duper front heavy, really awkward to hold, and kind of remove some of that romance from the SMG that the Percy's had going for it. Rate of fire has to be high, and it has an 100 round onboard capacity, which is pretty sweet. That means that this is effectively a better Perseus in just about every way, with the exception of the battery thing. Crazy. But overall, clean design language. I like the little pop-up sight in the front. I like the SMG feel. It looks like they took a lot of design language out of the Perseus handbook to bring this one to life. When you look at it in perspective and profile, it definitely seems like it's a little bit thicker than I would want it to be, but what are you going to do? You got to fit that hopper agitator and probably the conveyor belt that feeds these in there somehow. So he's kind of a chungo bungo boy, but other than that, pretty handsome looking blaster. For $70, I'm absolutely going to pick one up, and assuming, because again, we still don't see screw ports on these guys, and we only have paint on one side. But assuming we can get inside of these, I really want to crack one open. I really want to take it apart. I really want to tune it up to 11. I think that this is a good direction, a step in the right direction for Hasbro. Do we forgive them immediately for the Ultra sins? No, but are we willing to give them another chance? Absolutely, because again, for all of us to be cool, Nerf has to be cool. And that's it. That pretty much collects my thoughts on the line. I'm sure that there's a lot of different opinions running rampant out there about the cost, about the ammo, about alternatives, etc. I think that the biggest thing to be upset about is kind of what this does to rival players and like everyone who's bought into that line and how much they love that system. But for progress, there must be a price to progress, if you will. And price of progress aside, I'm pretty excited for these. I'm not like, oh my gosh, these are the greatest Nerf blasters ever, because clearly this pales in comparison to half-length dart performance, and it's pretty pitiful that the Verge article says that these are the highest stock performance blasters out there, because somebody should just send that man literally anything that includes half-lengths out of the package. While the Adventure and Dart Zone Pro things might not be running around claiming bombastic performance or ranges, they're certainly going to blow these things out of the water every step of the way. That's my opinion. Can't wait to get my hands on them. Can't wait to start tweaking and tinkering with them. Can't wait to see what 3D printed monstrosities the hobby comes up with, because if this is what Hasbro came up with for their initial launch, everybody's going to have something using tubes and chutes in no time flat, and that'll be really, really exciting as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know, which one are you most excited for down in the comment section down below. It's exciting to have something good from Hasbro to talk about for the first time in forever. Hit me up in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for watching. Much love. Blast on. Drac out.